What began as a simple plan for dinner quickly transformed into a moment that would spark outrage far beyond the walls of a single restaurant. In a busy urban district known for its nightlife and modern dining culture, a young girl wearing a hijab approached the entrance of a popular restaurant, unaware that her presence would soon become the center of a public controversy. According to witnesses, the atmosphere outside the venue was ordinary, with guests arriving in groups, laughter filling the air, and staff members ushering people inside without delay. Nothing about the situation suggested that this evening would turn into a viral news story discussed across social media platforms and online forums. As the girl reached the entrance, she was stopped by a member of the restaurant staff and informed that she would not be allowed inside. The reason given, as later explained by those present, was an alleged internal policy related to dress code requirements. The explanation immediately raised questions, as there was no visible signage at the entrance indicating such restrictions, and several other guests wearing casual headwear had already been admitted. The girl reportedly asked for clarification, speaking calmly and respectfully, attempting to understand why she was being singled out. She explained that her hijab was not a fashion accessory but a religious garment, an important part of her identity and personal beliefs. What unfolded next drew the attention of nearby patrons and passers-by. The conversation at the entrance lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough to create visible discomfort among those watching. Some guests slowed their steps, others quietly took out their phones, sensing that something was wrong. According to eyewitness accounts, the girl did not raise her voice or act aggressively. Instead, she stood quietly, listening as the staff member repeated that the rules could not be changed. The refusal was final, and no alternative solution was offered, such as speaking to a manager or clarifying the policy in more detail. Within moments, someone recorded the interaction on their phone. That short video, later uploaded online, became the catalyst for a much larger conversation. As it began circulating on social media, viewers reacted strongly to what they saw. Many expressed shock that such an incident could happen so openly in a modern, multicultural city. Others questioned how an internal policy could override basic principles of equality and respect in a public establishment. The image of a calm young girl being turned away simply because of her appearance resonated deeply with audiences from different backgrounds. News outlets quickly picked up the story, framing it as a developing situation rather than an isolated misunderstanding. Early reports focused on the visible facts: a refusal at the door, a reference to dress code rules, and a growing online backlash. Commentators noted that incidents like this often reveal underlying tensions that are otherwise ignored until captured on camera. The speed at which the story spread highlighted how sensitive and relevant issues of religious freedom and discrimination remain in everyday life. As the footage continued to gain traction, the restaurant's name began trending, drawing both criticism and calls for explanation. Users shared personal experiences of similar treatment, while others demanded clarification about the supposed policy. The tone of the conversation shifted from surprise to concern, with many asking how such decisions are made and who is held accountable when they result in exclusion. For supporters of the girl, the issue was clear: no one should be denied service in a public place based on religious appearance. By the end of the night, what started as a denied entry had evolved into a breaking news update followed closely by thousands. The girl herself had not made any public statement, yet her experience spoke louder than words. Her quiet presence at the center of the incident became a powerful symbol, reminding viewers that discrimination does not always appear loud or violent. Sometimes, it shows itself in a simple refusal at a doorway, turning an ordinary evening into a moment that forces society to look at itself and ask uncomfortable questions. As more details emerged, the incident began to take on a clearer shape, moving beyond a short viral clip into a wider public discussion about fairness and equal treatment. According to multiple eyewitnesses, the refusal happened during peak dining hours, when the restaurant was welcoming a steady flow of customers. The girl in the hijab had arrived like any other guest, waiting her turn and expecting to be seated. However, the moment she reached the entrance, the interaction took a different turn, one that many observers later described as unnecessary and uncomfortable. The staff member on duty reportedly pointed to an unwritten dress code, explaining that the restaurant did not allow head coverings inside. This explanation immediately raised doubts among those present, as several diners inside the venue were seen wearing baseball caps, beanies, and even wide-brimmed hats. Some witnesses quietly questioned the inconsistency, noting that no one else had been stopped or asked to remove their headwear. The selective enforcement of the rule became one of the most discussed aspects of the situation once it reached the public eye. The girl attempted to clarify her position, explaining that her hijab was a religious garment and not something she could simply remove to meet a fashion requirement. Her tone, according to people nearby, remained calm and respectful throughout the exchange. Despite this, the conversation appeared to go in circles, with the staff member repeating the same justification without offering flexibility or escalation to a supervisor. For onlookers, this rigid response only intensified the sense that the situation was being mishandled. As the discussion continued at the entrance, the surrounding atmosphere grew tense. Some customers waiting behind her exchanged uneasy glances, while others chose to step aside, unsure whether to intervene. A few reportedly expressed quiet support, suggesting that the policy did not seem fair, but no immediate action was taken by the restaurant to resolve the issue. The refusal stood, and the girl was ultimately left outside, separated from the bustling scene of diners enjoying their meals inside. Once the video surfaced online, public reaction was swift and emotionally charged. Social media platforms were flooded with comments, reposts, and opinion pieces condemning the restaurant's actions. Many users described the incident as a clear example of discrimination disguised as policy enforcement. Hashtags calling for accountability began trending, and the restaurant's review pages were quickly filled with negative feedback from people who had never even visited the place but felt compelled to respond. Human rights advocates and legal experts soon joined the conversation, pointing out that in many regions, denying service based on religious attire can violate anti-discrimination laws. They emphasized that private businesses, while allowed to set certain standards, are still bound by broader legal and ethical responsibilities. Several organizations used the incident to highlight ongoing challenges faced by visibly religious individuals in public spaces, arguing that such experiences are far more common than many realize. Media coverage expanded as television channels and online news platforms invited commentators to discuss the broader implications. Panel discussions debated whether this was a case of ignorance, poor staff training, or deliberate bias. Some argued that the employee may have been following unclear instructions, while others insisted that the responsibility ultimately lies with management and company culture. Regardless of the cause, the outcome remained the same. A young girl was excluded, and the impact of that exclusion was now being felt nationwide. Public opinion continued to harden as similar stories began to surface. People from different backgrounds shared their own experiences of being judged or denied access based on appearance, religion, or culture. For many, the incident served as a painful reminder that acceptance is often conditional, easily withdrawn in moments that test social comfort zones. What might have been dismissed as a minor disagreement at a restaurant door had now become a focal point in a much larger debate about inclusion, respect, and the everyday realities of discrimination in modern society. As public pressure continued to build, the restaurant at the center of the controversy was eventually forced to respond. Late the following day, management released a brief official statement addressing the incident, acknowledging the backlash, and promising to conduct an internal review. The statement emphasized that the establishment claimed to respect diversity and inclusion, and that the situation did not reflect its core values. However, for many members of the public, the wording felt vague and carefully constructed, offering little clarity about what had actually gone wrong or how similar incidents would be prevented in the future. The lack of a direct apology in the initial response became another point of criticism. Social media users and commentators questioned why the statement focused more on protecting the restaurant's image than addressing the experience of the girl who had been turned away. Calls for a public apology and concrete action grew louder, with many arguing that an internal review alone was insufficient. They demanded transparent policy changes, staff retraining, and clear guidelines to ensure that religious attire would not be treated as a violation of dress codes moving forward. Legal analysts weighed in as well, explaining that incidents like this can have serious consequences for businesses. Depending on local laws, refusing service based on religious appearance may expose establishments to lawsuits, fines, or regulatory scrutiny. Experts pointed out that even if a dress code exists, it must be applied consistently and must allow reasonable accommodations for religious expression. The inconsistency observed in this case, where other forms of headwear were permitted, weakened any defense the restaurant might offer. The incident also sparked a broader conversation about corporate responsibility in an increasingly diverse society. Business ethicists argued that companies operating in multicultural environments have a duty to train employees not only on rules but on cultural sensitivity and human dignity. A single employee's decision, made in seconds, can reflect an entire brand and cause long-lasting reputational damage. In this case, what happened at the door of one restaurant became a defining moment for how the public perceived the business as a whole. Meanwhile, the story continued to resonate far beyond the restaurant itself. Community leaders and advocacy groups used the moment to call for stronger protections against discrimination in public spaces. They stressed that visible symbols of faith, such as the hijab, often make individuals targets for exclusion, even when no harm or disruption is involved. For many, the girls' experience was not an isolated incident but part of a pattern that often goes unchallenged unless it is documented and shared widely. The girl at the center of the story remained largely silent, yet her experience continued to speak volumes. Supporters praised her calm demeanor and restraint, noting that her quiet response highlighted the imbalance of power in the situation. Rather than escalating the conflict, she stood her ground with dignity, allowing the incident itself to expose the unfairness many believed was at play. Her silence, intentional or not, became a powerful contrast to the noise of online debates and media commentary. As days passed, the restaurant faced declining ratings, canceled reservations, and calls for boycotts. At the same time, some voices urged caution, reminding the public that meaningful change requires more than outrage. They argued that education, dialogue, and clear policy reforms are essential to preventing future incidents. Several businesses in the area took the opportunity to publicly reaffirm their commitment to inclusivity, stating explicitly that customers of all backgrounds and religious identities were welcome. Ultimately, the controversy evolved into a larger reflection on the values that shape everyday interactions. It forced many to confront uncomfortable questions about who was made to feel welcome and who was quietly pushed aside. In a world where a single moment can be recorded and shared globally, the line between a private decision and a public statement has all but disappeared. The story of a girl in a hijab being denied entry to a restaurant became more than a news update. It became a reminder that inclusion is not measured by slogans, but by actions taken when no one expects to be watched.